Yeah, then Happy New Year, guys. Sorry, forgot that. Good evening and Happy New Year. Alright, so today we will, before we continue, do you have any questions? Once again. So, what is pageable, what is parsed, and so the second question I did not get, Adil, parsed and C data. Can you be more elaborate on that one? So talking about the pageable cache, so when we are executing the jobs, it will opt for different modes of memory usage. In XML, PDG, it takes about parsed and C data. In PDF, let me check. Within the data type definition, the PC data means parsed character data. Determines the character data. Right, so it is like see the C data tab. When you see that in the XML data, it means that is a character data, which is like a data type in our databases where we call it as varchar. So this one, it means character set data, and I don't know about the parsed data, parsed character, so I need to check on that. And the second one, when we are running the BODS jobs, so just give me a second. Yeah. Sorry. So yeah, let us look at this. In any query transformation, right, we can define whether the system can use a pageable cache or an in-memory cache. So pageable cache is something like which is which we can change the settings, especially when we are doing it to define. Let us say if I am trying to do a lookup ext on this one. Right, so this is the cache type specifications. One is like demand load cache, whereas it is allocated to this job on demand as per the requirement of the job. The second one is no cache, where you do not select the cache, which means you are pretty sure about the volume of data is pretty less, and whatever the calculations that you are doing, that is enough to, the memory that is allotted for this job by default at the time of execution is enough. And preload cache is something like it will based on the statistics of the job, it will allot some space for execution, right? So it will, by default, the system will throw some space and the job will execute in this one. And similarly, if you look at this, the pageable cache versus in-memory. In-memory is something that is run on the system RAM, right? And pageable is, I think it is a scalable RAM that is allocated at the runtime, I guess. Like the major thing that we will see here is the one that we are looked at, no demand, no cache pre-demand in, sorry, I'm getting lost. So these are the three cache types that we generally get. One is preload cache, where the system allots this space available, which will be the default. And demand load cache, if you are running something in an iteration, you generally prefer for demand load cache, and the other one is preload cache. So other than what are the basic definitions that I am giving, so you can go to help.sap.com/bods, and there you will get the documentation. I think like that is one place where you can get the exact definition of this one. Okay. Okay, there are two types of parameters. One that is available in the variables and parameters, and the others is substitution parameters. What is the difference? Yeah, we spoke about this. If we are talking about variables, right? So this one. So anything that you are doing at the job level, so you are passing some parameter instead of passing some like they are pretty much same variables and parameters. You can differentiate so that your code has a specific set of variants and variables and specific set of parameters. So this inbound directory can be a parameter, an outbound directory can be a parameter, an error report path can be a parameter. So when you go to this one, the tools and system configurations or substitution parameters, so this is at the repository level. So every job can refer to this one, but these variables or parameters that you create at a job level, they are restricted only for that job. So one is at the job level, parameters and variables. The second one is at the system level, the repository level. Alright, any more questions, guys? Yes, Adil. So the global variable, yeah, global variable, when you create it, you call it at the job level, entire job level. You create that at a job. So when you go to this job and you want to create some variables, click on the variable window, you will see the variables, global and local variables. You can go create them at this level. So they are specific to job. You can utilize a variable as a parameter as well. Technically speaking, both will perform the same activity. Okay, yeah. So today we will look at the real-time jobs, and I think we spoke about manipulating the real-time job. The other one that we will look at is, oh, not this one. Alt F4. Sorry, system is a bit slow. Okay. We'll look at the real-time jobs. So before going to the real-time jobs, we will see what are the prerequisites at the system level that are required for you to run a real-time job. So what are the system level settings that you have to do? Basically, these are the administrative roles, but we will see at the system level what are the prerequisites that we need to have in place to make sure that your real-time jobs will run, or you can expose a web service out of data services system. Alright, so to do that, there are two areas in which you need to do a cross-check. One is your server manager, which is nothing but your job server. The navigation is start, all programs, data services 4.2, and here you will go for the server manager. In the server manager, whatever the job server that is assigned to the local repository. So if you put your mouse pointer on this one, that will give the name of the job server. So go to the job server JS_local that is available by clicking on configuration editor. Go to JS_local, and once you click on this, you make sure that you check these two boxes. Right, so this is SNMP communicator, adapter communicator, and SSL protocol for adapters, message broken communications. So these two should be enabled for you to interact with a web service. Right, web services, something that we are trying to expose through data services or call through data services from the external system in the form of a service. These two should be enabled. That is point number one. And once you enable these two, you will be given a communication port number. And remember, when you are doing it on a standalone system, the first job server that you create on the standalone system, you will be given an opportunity to enable this. The second things will yeah, so that is what I am trying to say, Adil. When you are creating a job server for the first time, these two should be enabled, right? You should check these two. If you don't do that, probably the system will assume that you will not need these things, right? So you should check these two, and the communication port will be automatically given. And once you do this thing, you will see the job server port and adapter support is enabled and SSL protocol is enabled and the communication port. So you'll see these things. And the second thing is go to the Access Server tab, and by default on some systems you will see this as empty. On a freshly installed system or on a system where this service is not configured, you will see this as empty. Just click on Configuration Editor, click on Add, and this communication port will be 4000. The one that you see on the job server will be 4001, and you just browse to the temporary directory, c:temp or any data services directory here, right, which will just create a path for you to execute this. And here you need to check SSL protocol and enable Access Server. So this is the key checkbox which enables your Access Server and allow you to run. So this is already done, so that is the reason why I'm not doing it. So it takes to the configuration directory, and then the default port number is 4000. Then you can enable the SSL protocol, Access Server, and click on it. So if you disable this, I'll show you the other area where you have to disable that option as well. So yeah, sorry. So when you go to the configuration editor on the job server tab, and you want to add a new job server, these will be grayed out because this is the second job server or the third job server that you are going to create on the system, right? But not the first. But when you are trying to do the first job server creation, right, you will be given an opportunity to enable them. So that is the reason why I'm saying when you are doing the first job server on your system, these two should be enabled. Or just take a screenshot and send it to your system administrator and ask them to enable this, or edit the existing job server and enable this. Okay. Right, this is the first one, and the second one is the Access Server. So when you are trying to create a second job server, third job server, it will be grayed out. You will be given an opportunity per system, only one time it should be enabled. Sorry, bad throat. The second one is the Access Server. You need to make sure that this configuration is given. It generally goes to program files, business objects, right? So program data or program files, business objects, data services, and configuration folder. And this is 4000. You enable these two, and once you enable these, any changes on the job server, alright, so you just need to make sure that you close and restart, which will restart the services in the backend. Just click on OK. So this will actually restart your job server services. And once that is done, if you want to cross check, you can go to the control panel, administrative tools, and you can go to services. And in the services, if you are on the server, remember you will not be able to see them on the terminals, but if you are working on a server, you should be able to see the SAP data services is started. Right, it just restarts. We saw this when we are creating a job server in the initial sessions. Now once this is done, the second cross check that you need to do is in the data services management console. This is a prerequisite. So the navigation is start, all programs, data services 4.2, and data services management console. This opens in a web page. few options when we are looking at data services management console. I told that we will be looking at them, so we will be covering them now. In the administrator, so the first tab that you will see here is status, the status of the entire landscape, right? All the local repositories, job servers, everything that is assigned. So in this status, let me show it to you once it is refreshed. Alright, in this status you see something called as real time, which is grayed out. So generally this should be up and running for you to run any real-time job on your system, right? And you also see that under the batch there is nothing called real-time. So first you need to enable your access server on the data services management console 2 for you to run the real-time jobs, right? So for that, go to the management, and here you have something called as access server. So click on the access server and you can add so give the server name, which is BOIDS in my case. Then communication port that it is given as for the access server is 4000, and this is where you have to keep no or yes based on the selection that you have made on the server manager, which is your job server. There we enable the SSL protocol, so you can enable this and click on apply, and it says it is already exists. We can ping this one, okay, at least we can ping from here. So it says access server BODS is valid, which means whatever the entry that we gave here is valid. So instead of saving this, we can go to the previous entry and we can activate that one too, or you can delete that and add a new one. You can select this and remove this, or you can add a new one after removing this. Or to activate this, click on that one, right? Here the SSL protocol is set as no, you keep it as yes, apply, and once the changes are done, you can ping yes. So now, did you notice that if when we are trying to, sorry, let me remove one to avoid any confusion. When we are trying to create the second one with one second, what is this? Yeah, so what I was saying is when we are trying to create another one with the same server name, it is not allowing, which means you can enable only on one job server. So I'm trying to add a fresh one, the server name BOIDS, the port is 4000, and enable protocol, apply, right? And you want to test it, you can open that one and you can ping test to make sure your data services management console is communicating with the access server that is enabled on your job server. So once this is done, remember we don't have anything under batch, but once this is done, let me refresh the page, or automatically it should say something called as real time. So this is one of the most important thing that you need to, right? So you see this something called as real time. So this is one of the most important thing that we need to enable on the system to make sure our real-time jobs work. So go back to status and you should see the real-time services as up and running. Right now you see this BOIDS 4000 is up and running, and the adapters are also enabled by default once you configure the real-time services. Okay, so these are the pre-checks that you need to do on the system to make sure your real-time jobs can run. So that is given in this document, the pre-checks. Right, one is, this is a 3.x data services window, which is a little different from the current 4.x job servers. So this is job server properties, these two should be checked in. And then access server, again there is a change in the GUI. The access server should be enabled here. This is access server configuration to run on the computer, that should be enabled. And after that, the services should be up and running. And once you expand I'll get to that one, the adapter instances, right? Alright, so once you go to the adapter instances, you'll see the job server name with which the adapter SNMP adapter enabled is active. And once you click that one, you will see the web services up and running. Right, so there are a few services if you want to add a special configuration adapter. So you can click on that adapter configuration, and then you can use a separate adapter port ID by clicking on add. Generally, we interact with web services with the type REST and SOAP, but if you have any Hive adapters, HTTP adapters, JDBC, OData adapters, Salesforce, SuccessFactors, so you can integrate all these things through web services with your data services. You can add them as needed. Alright, so this is with our prerequisite settings that need to be done on the system for you to run a real-time job. The second one that we will look at is how do you create a real-time job, and how different is that from a bad job, and what is executing a real-time job in a designer versus executing that from the data services management console. So to create a real-time job, if you select the real-time job, right click and click on, sorry, not a new bad job. Alright, go for a real-time job. This is hardly used in the projects unless and until you are working on any real-time data governance or any job that you want to run forever. So, which means when you are doing a bad job execution, the job runs in batches as per the time you schedule or as per the manual intervention you do to execute the job. It runs in batches. Right. Let us say if you are scheduling the job to run once in every hour, as per our banks, generally when you are trying to do a transaction or do a transfer, online transfer on a bank, so these banks, if it is within the bank transaction, they are scheduled to run once in 5 minutes. So when you do a transfer and your transfer period is pretty close to the execution time, so you should see the amount move to the other person's account within 5 seconds, right? Because your time is close to the scheduled minute. And if not, if you just create transferred and within 5 minutes that gets pushed into the other person's account because your transactions are scheduled in batches. But there is something called as real time. So what is real time? Real time means the reason why this is given as a real time is as you change on your source, this real-time job is scheduled between your source and target, and as you change on your source, the same inserts, updates and deletes should be reflected on your target system, right? Because the source and the target system are connected through a real-time job, which means technically speaking, a job should be running each and every second, which is impossible. You cannot run a job continuously. So that is the reason why we create a real-time job and convert that into a service and run the service so that you can run a service on the system. So when we go to the services in the control panel administration tool, right, so there are so many services that will be up and running on your system, which enables you to do different activities right from your Adobe applications to data services or Microsoft Office or whatever. So you can convert your job to one of these services or a similar service like this, which will be up and running continuously so that any transaction that you do on your source will be reflected on the target. So very few projects utilize this process and will not have any or I don't have any real-time scenario to talk about this because one of the project some of my colleagues worked where they did near real-time data transition with the help of real-time jobs, but again that is in the form of a service, right? So sorry, I am calling this job as RT_P code lookup. So this is a lookup that we are doing on postal codes. I am giving a unique name, P code lookup 123, and this data flow I'm calling this as df underscore postal code lookup. So whenever you create a real-time job, you'll have a process begin and process end. You double click on them. You cannot do any changes within that one. That's a fixed syntax that the system will provide, between which you need to keep all your data flows, right? And now for our job, we have two XML files that we'll be adding. One is your source file, which is a request file, and the target file is a reply file. So both of them are XML schemas. Browse, and we have something called as request, which is your source with an extension .xsd. So namespace, I'll give it root element, select the postcode lookup. You can leave the namespace if it is empty, or your data owner, whoever is giving you this XSD, will provide you the names case. Click on OK, and similarly go and add the reply file. This is the request file, the source file that we added. The second one is the reply file, which is your target file, which is also an XSD file. Open it. I'm giving the same name as request and reply. Now I open your data flow and select your request file and make it as a message source. Now we are in real-time jobs, so we have to make it as a message source and this reply as a message target. Right, so real-time jobs, it is called as message source or a message target. Batch jobs, it is called as a file source and a file target. So now the next important step that we need to do when we are dealing with an XML is point to the data file. So this structure has only one column called as postal code. So point to its data file, which is in the XML folder, which is request, postcode lookup request. Open that one. This is the .xml file, and you will see one postal code value given here. You can go to that file and modify the value and refresh the service to see the changes. D150LQ, which has two addresses, right? And if you look at the reply file, this reply file has two columns. One is postcode and the second one is address. So we need to fetch the address, and I'm just trying to save that in the outbound directory. I'm calling this as reply. Reply.xml, save it. So now I need to get the address, so I can use the database tables, which is demo address and demo postal code, to get the address value from these two tables and map to the output. So first activity that we will do is get address. I'm just giving the name as get address, and connect it with the postal code XML file, the database file, and this one, and we need to get the address as an output. So this is the address column. So for this we need to give a proper where condition so that we will get the specific addresses related to the postal code. So the postal code of the XML file is equal to the postal code of the postcode table, and the postcode ID of the postal code table is equal to the postcode ID of the address table. So we are referring this one to the postcode table, and then we are referring the ID to the ID from both the address table and postcode table. So we will get the relevant address as an output. And now we need to build a reply. We got the address, then we need to build the reply. So call it as build reply. So connect the postal code from here and address from here, and then you connect it to the reply target file. So now you have both address and postcode on the left hand side in a flat structure, and these are in the nested structure. So we know how to map. So go to the build reply, make it current, and go to the from tab and make sure it is pointing to the postal code, not the address, and then select the postal code and drag and drop it on this to do a mapping. Do a similar activity, go to the second nested schema, make it current, and make sure you select the address. So this is one of the most important. If you don't select the address, and it will throw out an error, right? So you should specifically say from where each and every segment of a nested structure, it can be your IDOC or XML schema or JSON. So from which segment is getting populated from which table, you have to mention that. And now since we mapped, you validate this. It's a conversion warning, so you can ignore the warning. Save it and execute the job. So if I execute the job from Data Services Designer, so this job will run and it will complete, which means this is running and ending. So but for us to have a real-time job, it should run continuously. So this is what you call as a syntax check. When you run a real-time job within Data Services Designer, you call it as a syntax check. So if you double click on this one, it has got the correct addresses, right? So your syntax is good and your output is good. Now you need to convert this job as a service. So to do that activity, go to your Data Services Management Console, expand the real-time, expand the BODS server, and then click on the real-time services. So on there you will see two tabs. One is your real-time status for the jobs that are already running, and the second one is real-time configuration. This is where we go and add our job or convert our job to a service. For that you need to click on add, and here give the service name as, I'm giving the name as service underscore RK, and then click on browse, and you can browse to your local repository and to your job. So here our local repository is repo underscore LR7 and the job name is PRT P code lookup 123. Right, so go to your local repository LR7 and this is our job. So just click on the job, and once you click on the job, the remaining columns or remaining cells will be automatically populated. Then the service provider, which means the job server on which you are adding, you just need to click on add, and if it is not showing as enable here, you select that and enable that one and just click on apply. So here we are giving a service name and we are trying to browse to our local repository and to our job, and the service provider is the job server on which it will be running, and once you do that, it will be added to the list, which is serv underscore rk. Now you click on the status tab and you will see it in orange color, which means the service is added but it is not running. Now you select this one and you start it, and now your job, which is converted into a service, and your service is up and running. So just to refresh, I'm switching between the tabs here. Right, so now your service is running. So as your data gets changed on your source, the target table or target file will be refreshed automatically. So this is how we actually convert a real-time job into a service, or in the project terminology, this is how you expose your job into a service. So when I say I expose my job into a service, I should give a handle for the other tools to read this changes from, right? Which means I need to give a hyperlink. That is how we read the services, right? A web service, we provide that with the help of a hyperlink. So that can be done with the help of web services option here. You click on the web services, Alright, and once you click on the web services, you will see three different tabs. One is configuration. You can give your WSDL a label as well, and then the status of that web service. So first go to the configuration tab. Right, in the configuration tab, just scroll down to the bottom, and here you will see something called as a drop down, and if you click on the drop down, you will see add a real-time service. Right, you can select that one and click on apply. Right, and you will see the service. Select the service and click on add. So once it is added, you will be able to see the service added in the status tab, the first tab. Alright, so web services is added successfully. So click on the web services here. Right, so you should be able to see the name serv_rk. Right, this is a real-time service. And now to expose this into a web service, so based on the other system's capacity, for example, you can read that using tools like SOAP. So you can select the version of your web service, and then this option, right, custom WSDL labels, it will allow you to create a label on the system. Right, you can add, select a service, and give a name or a label to that one. Right, you can give a handle. Right, so you can select that handle from here, and then you click on view WSDL. It will give you a hyperlink. So this hyperlink, which will display the XML data in this one, but this is the service that you share with the other systems. Now, right. So if you look at this, it is localhost, which is nothing but the server name, and then 8080 is the port number, data services, servlets, right? And the type of file that you are sending is a web service, version is 2.1, and this is a WSDL XML file. Right. So this is the hyperlink that you can pass into the other systems and let it read this information. So when you pass that service to the system, so as you refresh, the data that changes on your source is automatically refreshed into the other systems. So typically data services can also read the web service, but in this version it is not working. Let us cross check, or let us see. Till now what we saw is how do we expose a batch or real-time job into a web service, and we will see how do you invoke a web service into data services. So that can be done with the help of data services data store. So go to new and call it as ds_WSDL web services, and database type. So data store type, it can be an adapter, REST, or SOAP. So based on the web service that you are selected in your services, and you enable this in your data services management console. If you go to adapters, right here we added the adapters, web services, and enabled them, right? So based on the option that you select, REST, SOAP, mechanism, or in the configurations you will see, right? You can select the REST adapters or web services adapters, or right? So these things are based on options that you select. So you can go and choose, right? It can be an adapter. If it is an adapter, then you need to go and tell on which job server you are running it, and the instance of the adapter, which is like web service, and then the URL of the web service. You need to just paste the URL. Alright, and then if this URL is protected by a username and password, you have to give the username and password here. And if your system is supported by a proxy, you can add the proxy information here as well. Right, proxy is another option I'll show you. So once you click on apply, it should not throw out any errors, and click on OK. Your web service data store is created. And if you expand this, you just see functions. You don't see any tables or anything. Your web services can be called as in the form of a function. So to select this one, you select this and click on open. And this is where it is actually failing. So it says that some packages or patches are missing on the system, but it should show you, right, on the external metadata. If you select this, it should show you the services, and if you expand the services, it should show you the service name serv_rk. So let me try creating with the types REST or SOAP. This is not working on the system for sure. I tried it in previous batches as well. You can just give the web service, and here if you go to this one, so this is where you pass the proxy configurations. If your system is blocked by some proxy, you can give this. Authentication is basic, which means authorization header, or the different types of authorizations. That again depends on the system. Whichever is sending you a web service, the authentication that is set on the system, generally it will be basic. And if you click on apply, so this is a patch issue on the server, but for one of our recent customers, they had a requirement, so we updated the patch, we wrote to SAP, we raised the service ticket, and then imported those patches onto the server, and it was working. So it is something that I don't say that it will work, but it will not work, but there is a patch missing on the server. So it says that additional information when importing the metadata. So you want to save it anyway. So if you save it, you'll not be able to, read the data from that. Right. Just showing you how these data stores are created. And once this data store is created, you just expand the service, select your service, right-click and import. That will be imported in the form of a function, and you can just call that using your query transformation. Right. So in these years, I haven't used any scenario where we use these web services. We just tried for one service for our customer where we wrote to SAP and downloaded that patch, and then we tried to work, and it technically worked on the system. But on this system, it is giving this cannot browse the metadata adapter instances error. Okay. So once it is there in your system, you can just call it as a function, as a new function call in your query transformation by using row generation, because you don't have a source, so you can just use row generation as a source. I can show that to you on the PDF, how to read it. So don't get confused with the screenshots in this document. They refer to a bit older version, but now this is how you create this one. Create a new data store, and on this data store select this as an adapter, because 3x version has only an adapter instance, but the 4x has REST and SOAP and other versions also available. So give the job server name, adapter instances, and then pass the hyperlink and just click on apply, and your data store will be created. And once your data store is created, select that, right click and open that one. You should be able to select the external metadata, and under the real-time services you should be able to see your service. So select that service, right click and import. That will be imported as a function. Now once it is imported as a function, you can just create a job to invoke the real-time service and create a data flow to invoke the real-time service. And since this is a function, this is a service which is not having a physical table as a source. Now you can use row generation, add a query transformation, and in the query transformation you just copy the structure of this one, the post code, and paste it on the schema out on the query transformation. Paste it and then pass a default value. Just make it current. Once you paste it here, make it current and pass a hard-coded value as like D150LQ for the postal code, which is shown in the screen. Select the postal code. In the from tab, you need to make sure that it is getting populated from the row generation transformation, which is a dummy source. And after that, you select the postal code column and pass the value D150LQ. And next, add one more query transformation. This is just to invoke the structure, and then add one more query transformation, select the schema out, right click and go for a new function call. And this is where you can actually look at the function names. In the function name, you will see the data store name. So select the data store and you will see the function name on the right hand side. Select that, click on next, and here this is a small trick. You need to map the node to the node, but not the column to the column. If you cannot do this column to column. If you select this node on the schema input schema, and drag and drop it to the schema out, then you will be able to see this one is populated. And just click on finish, and then add an XML template as an output file from the tool palette. Write XML, then give a name, and then select the output folder outbound directory path and give a name for the file, and then go and run the job. And once your job is completed, right, so on the output file you'll be able to see D150LQ, Eaton Hall and the Garden Cottages, right? If you open the output file in your local drive, you will be able to see this file generated. So this is how data services can read and write web services information. This is how it interacts with the external systems, web services. So this has these two documents are very helpful for me to especially understand how we work with IDOCs and nested structures, because none of the documents talk about it. These two documents talk in detail about how do you handle the nested structures and how do you interact with the services, or how do you especially handling the nested structures. I learned from these documents, so these are good. You can refer to these documents, and then I guess there are some forums over the net which speak in more details about that, so you can refer to that for further examples. You can refer to those forums. But again, back to the point, it is very rarely used option in any project, because generally we will be using data services as an ETL extraction, transformation and loading, and where we either transfer the data from source to target, or create a warehouse to the customers, a new data warehouse to the customers on which their new systems will be built. So any questions on this manipulating the XML data and real-time jobs, these two scenarios that we spoke yesterday and today, and on the system level prerequisites too? Okay, so if you don't have any questions, we'll call it a day, and tomorrow we will look into a quick introduction to SAP HANA, because most of you guys are aware about it, but we will just do a quick introduction to that. And after that, let me check if it is connecting. If not, I can ask my system guys to reset it for me. So this is a workspace that we generally create on our system, so that when I log in and I do some changes or run something, the logs will be created on my system. Let me just check if the username and password is working then. Yeah, if we are skipping the introduction to SAP HANA, we can just do that here itself. Okay. Okay, I think I will check them a little later, right? But I think it is working. So tomorrow we will see how do we add the systems and a little quick overview on the architecture of SAP HANA and what is this. Before we load the data into SAP HANA, we will try to understand what is SAP HANA, and then once we understand the fundamentals, then we will load the data into SAP HANA using data services, and we'll talk about the differences between other data provisioning mechanisms versus data services. And after that, we will quickly run into the project orientation, where we'll be talking about two different projects, or we'll talk about the best practices, especially which will help us in the project execution to minimize the project build time, and it also allows us to utilize the system, SAP provided templates, which will help us to build our jobs in most accurate manner. How much of the work that you did today is done by the administrator? Which part is done by the developer? So whatever we have done on the server manager and the data services management console as a prerequisite, so those are done by the administrators in the first itself, right? So when we are creating the job server, so enabling those two and access server enabling should be done, and after that the management, this access server should be configured by the administrators, and this adapter should be added by the administrators. So these are the things that they will do, and then they will just make sure on your system, in the status, the real-time jobs are up and running. So that is done by the administrators. They will not really, interfere with us on the development. We need to be specific about what kind of adapter that we are trying to execute, so that they will enable the adapter and give it to us, right? On the other hand, creating a real-time job, adding it as a service, so till the administrator's job will be till this is up and running. So developers will be creating a job, then configuring that to a service, and then running the service, and all these things are done by the developers. So any more questions, guys? Just trying out something. Just let me check if this is. I think I have these credentials. I can add them a little later. Alright, so if you don't have any questions, we'll call it a day. And once again, wonderful new year to you guys, and have a blessed year ahead. And hope that you'll get into data services pretty soon in this year, and we'll get an opportunity to work together. Right. So take care for now, and we'll again connect in tomorrow's session where we'll be looking at loading the data into SAP HANA. And once it is loaded, we will see, we'll log into the SAP HANA and we'll have a quick look into this one to see how the data is loaded and where it is exactly loaded, and have a quick view on the data as well.
Thank you, Rakesh. Happy New Year.
Yeah, thank you guys. Good day.